Today is the beginning of a new era on Practice Underwater. Matt, do you want to let the audience know what's going on today?
Yeah, I mean, we've teased this for, I guess, a couple of months now, and it's finally here. We have Suzanne, our director of coaching, leading this interview. And this is a big step forward for us, and we're super excited.
So this was something that we had really wanted to do for a long time, but we also wanted our coaching department to get settled in and all the things that they needed to do before we kind of introduced them on air. But Practice Underwater has always been the segment of our show that talks about our coaching and our coaching department and the way that our one-on-one coaching has worked. And at the very beginning, right, Matt and I launched it with us doing the coaching because that was how that started. And, now obviously it's much different. So, Matt, listening to this interview with Suzanne and the next 2 weeks, what are some of your takeaways on kind of the biggest differences that the audience has to look forward to between both, the different styles of interviews? I think it really lends itself to know like how the coaching goes and why we made the switch.
Yeah, and honestly isn't really even something we planned to be in effect until George and I listened to Suzanne have this interview you're about to hear, that she approaches these from such a different perspective and much more tactile. A lot of she brings up things we would never bring up, which is amazing because I think these interviews would work great with her differing perspective. And not to say it's contrasting, she just focuses on different areas of the growth of the person on the interview, and then we can bring different perspectives on the intro outros. So I think it kind of came together even more beautifully than we actually planned.
And if you don't understand what Matt's talking about, so let me take a step back and talk about our coaching department's evolution. So when Matt and I were doing the coaching, we felt like we were missing some key things, especially with the front office organization. Anytime a client had an AR issue, it felt like we couldn't do anything about it. I mean, I had a client at 90 AR days for like
Me too.
6 months, and it was just almost embarrassing. It was like, fix your AR. And he's like, okay. And then it doesn't get fixed. And that was about the extent of our involvement. And in the interview, you'll hear Suzanne, especially next week. You'll hear her talk about where front desk members sit. Talking about specific roles and asking about check in, check out, and it. You'll see the different layer that an office manager turned coach adds to a relationship instead of a dentist coaching. And because the reality is, those are the things that move a practice: are the staff, the performance of the team. We can work on the mindset of the dentist all we want, but if we don't have the team doing the things that they need to do, we ultimately can't move the office as far as we want. Like, we can fix the mindset, but the AR doesn't go down unless we call the front office and talk to her about how we do collections. So I think it's really, really cool to show that. But if you listen to the interview, you're going to feel like something's missing. And that's why Mastermind is in place. And it's funny. So what I'd like us to do in the interview is, or what I'd like you to do in Practice Underwater, is think about it in the perspective of intro, outros, and we'll bring Alex Sharp, our director of Mastermind, more on these segments from now on. But the intro, outros are the mastermind portion of your coaching relationship. They're the doctor portion of your relationship. So the way it works for a client in our new coaching program, as opposed to when Matt and I were doing it, it was just a call with Matt and I once a month. Now it's one of our coaches will have a call directly with the client, and then they'll have calls with the team and sort of train the team. And then the client also gets mastermind. And so in this interview, you're going to hear a lot of stuff about associates, and listening to it, I felt like the mindset around, contract, or like kind of stepping away clinically, and a lot of that stuff was not addressed. And those are the types of conversations we have doctor to doctor, peer to peer, and mastermind. And so I think it's going to be really cool for you guys to listen to the interview. And there's things that she talks about over the next 2 weeks that we have never once discussed on Practice Underwater, like where people sit at the front desk, or, just ways to deal with staff. And I think it's good for you guys to get that more tactile perspective. It's much more actionable, a lot of the things she's saying. But Matt and I also felt like we got to see where Mastermind comes in, kind of out loud in our coaching relationships. So it was really cool for us too, to really see this come to life on air. So Matt, do you have anything else that you want to add before we get started?
No, I think we'll jump right to Suzanne, and then we'll have a lot of thoughts coming out in the outro. So stay tuned for that.
Our director of coaching, Suzanne Rassy, with the interview with our fake doctor, Keith.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Practice Underwater. For those who don't recognize my voice yet, I'm Suzanne Rassy. I'm the Director of Coaching with Shared Practices. I'm here with our real doctor whose fake name is Keith. Hey Keith, how are you?
I'm great today. Thanks, Suzanne.
Thank you for being our guest today. I'm super excited to find out more.
I am
Good.
excited to find out where I can improve.
I want to share a little bit of a conversation I was having on a discovery call with a doctor, and I think this is a perfect time to do that. So, if you don't mind, I'm going to do a little sidebar for the audience here before we do a deep dive into your practice. I got the question about how practice underwater actually works behind the scenes. I don't actually meet the guest beforehand. None of us do. All of the questions that I'm asking are really for my benefit as well as the audience's benefit. So I love that part. I'm always hoping secretly that as the audience is listening, that they're kind of coming up with ideas and things that they've either heard George or Matt or I talk about, and they're coming up with a treatment plan for you at the same time. So that's the fun part about Practice Underwater is as our audience grows and becomes more familiar with our philosophy, then they're coming up with all kinds of ideas for you as well. So thanks for allowing me to sidebar. Why don't you start by telling us about the practice?
I graduated dental school in 2011, and I did an HPSP scholarship program through the Air Force. So the first 3 years of my career were doing an AEGD and then serving in the Air Force for 2 years. I knew I wanted to be in private practice, and I knew I wanted to be an owner at some point, whether that be solo or part of a group. So I took an associateship after I got out of the Air Force in 2014 at a group practice. The owner hired me on to become his eventual partner. And within about 2 weeks of being there, I knew that it wasn't meant to be as far as partnership goes. He was a great boss, but I could just tell if we were going to be partners, I wasn't going to have much of a say in how things were going to be done. So I looked around, looked at practices to buy, thought about going back to school to specialize, was kind of lost for a while, and then decided to do a startup. I took the breakaway course, listened to lots of podcasts, felt like I was ready to take the leap. So I opened from scratch at my current location, which is kind of on the outskirts of a big metropolitan area, kind of a growing bedroom community type place. And we opened June of 2017 with just myself, one administrative person, and an assistant in a 6 operatory ground up startup.
So you said 6 ops. Is that currently where you started at 6? Is that what you're using now?
Correct. I only equipped 3 of them right out of the gate, but yes, now all 6 are equipped.
Let's talk team. Tell me about how you've grown now. What's progressed since then?
Sure. About a month in, I hired my first hygienist, and then we've just kind of steadily grown from there, adding team members as we've grown. So now we have 2 administrative people, 3 dental assistants that each work 3 days a week, 3 dental hygienists that each work 4 days a week, and then myself and a part-time associate.
2 front office that work full time.
Correct.
So the practice is open how many days a week now?
We're open 5 days a week.
Tell me how many days you work and how many days the associate works.
I work 5 days a week clinically right now, which is less than ideal and wearing me out. The associate works 2 days a week, and I'm there both days that he is there.
12 days of hygiene, right?
Yes.
On 2 days, you're doing 3 hygiene checks.
Correct? Yes. On 2 days a week that I'm there alone, we only have 2 hygienists working because not all they're staggered, so they don't all work the same days of the week. So there's a couple days where we only have 2 hygienists and 3 days where we have 3 hygienists.
How do you have things set up from a front office standpoint? Like, tell me about how the interaction is. Is it both of them kind of do everything, or do they have split roles?
Nope, they both pretty much do everything. So on our busier days, the days that all 3 hygienists are there, both of them are there together, kind of staggered. And then on the 2 kind of lower key days, when only 2 hygienists are there with 1 doctor, there's just 1 administrative person. But they're cross-trained, so both of them know how to do everything.
Procedures. Tell me about what's typical in your office. procedurally wise on the clinical side?
Sure. So, like I said, we're kind of outer ring suburbia. So our patient demographic is people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s with their 2.2 kids. So pretty young, relatively healthy patient demographic. So a lot of bread and butter, hygiene, operative. I'm more surgically oriented, so I'll basically take out any tooth. I do some IV sedation and third molars. I place some straightforward implants. Other than that, we do pretty basic stuff. I mean, we'll do operative on children as long as they're well behaved and it's relatively straightforward treatment. Molar endo isn't really my gift, so those all get referred out, but I'll do anterior premolar cases. We don't do much removable pros just because our patient demographic doesn't need it.
You really outlined your current reality very well. Now, I know that there's kind of an end game for you. First thing you said off the bat was 5 days, not ideal. Tell me what ideal looks like for you.
Ideal is working clinically 3 days a week and then having a lot of flexibility on the other 2 days, whether it's working a half day administratively, mentoring a younger associate, not coming in at all. But I don't want to be working more clinically more than 3 days a week right now. But it's also hard to let go because it's my baby.
If you're there 5 days, what is the days the associate works?
Tuesdays and Thursdays.
How do you feel about that?
He's been helpful. He's reduced my stress level because on those days it's very busy, 3 hygienists to check, busy operative schedule, but it really hasn't allowed me any more freedom because he's relatively new grad, young out of school. So turning over the keys to the practice and trusting that things will run smoothly and efficiently without me there and we stay on time and on schedule has been a challenge.
Why do you think that is?
We're a PPO practice. I mean, it's busy. It's busy. And one of my big important points, I guess, is customer service. And I think a big part of that is running smoothly and efficiently and on time. And I think if we're not on time, it creates a lot of frustration, especially among our team, because they're used to working with me, who always runs on time, always does things efficiently. And patients as well, I guess. We've kind of come to be known for customer service and respecting patients' time.
So do you feel like the associate schedule is the most ideal for you in terms of 3 days? I guess my point is there's not a lot of downtime, right? Even if you were to say, oh, I won't be here Tuesday, I won't be here Thursday, as of next week, having a day to work and a day down and a day to work and a day down, while it may help with the management side, does it give you the break you really need physically?
It would help, and we're getting there with him. It's just been, some babysitting, which is fine and to be expected. I was there too as a newer grad. So I'm completely empathetic and understand it. But at the same time, I feel like I need to be there to make things run smoothly. But my hope is that we get there. And I only offered him 2 days a week. This was back in the fall when we were kind of still a lot of unknown around the COVID shutdown. Would we get shut down again? How busy would we be going into the fall and winter? And pretty much immediately, I recognized I made a mistake and I should have hired him full time.
So is there no wiggle room with this associate? Is that all that? So the associate's
he's committed to another.
as well?
He's committed to another office the other 3 days of the week and isn't ready to jump over full time to me.
Is that ever an option, or do we feel like part B of this story has a second associate coming into the picture?
Yeah, I feel like I'm dying. Working 5 days a week clinically, doing 15 to 20 hours of administrative stuff a week, and trying to be a good husband and a good father to 2 small children. So I'm currently looking for another associate to help me carry the load so I can hand off some more of the dental stuff.
The relationship may be such that does this associate know that if someone else walks into the picture that may actually be a full-time person and may be open to that? I mean, I guess let's kind of streamline. What are you looking for? Are you looking for a part-time person to complement that, or are you looking for someone that's full-time as you continue to grow?
I'm looking to keep my current associate because I think he's great, but I'm also looking for a full-time person. I'm not ready to hand over any ownership stake right now, so I'm realistic in knowing that looking for a full-time associate, the people that will be, or the doctors that will be interested in that position, are more likely to be younger, newer grads. So if I want to go down from 5 days a week clinically to 3, I mean, quite honestly, 2 days of my clinical workload would probably be close to a full-time schedule for a newer grad or someone, relatively early in their career.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. You've got enough of a patient base and a good solid new patient flow. But I'm glad you reached out now, because I think next week when we come back and talk about the details, I think you'll begin to see that there are some things. This is, the time where you want to put some real strategies in place to allow that to happen, so that someone else joining comes in and makes you feel better about perhaps taking a little bit of a step back when it comes to holding the reins. Good. So, okay. So from the standpoint of you reaching out to us, tell me a little bit about what the factor was there. What led you to say, I need some help?
We've grown pretty fast and been more successful than I could have anticipated when I opened the doors. And we've seen pretty steady, good growth. But for about the last year, I feel like we've kind of been stuck a little bit at this ugly duckling phase. And much of that is self-inflicted. Me kind of hitting my personal limit on productivity and efficiency, both clinically and business-wise. And just kind of getting to that point where I'm maxed out and need to start handing stuff off. And we're a little stuck, partly because I can't find the personnel to hand stuff off to, and partly due to my reluctance to hand things off.
I love you being honest about that. How easy is it to find team members in your area?
It's extremely difficult to find clinical team members. I mean, we needed a 4th hygienist a month ago, if not sooner than that. And there's nothing out there. It's crickets. And dental assistants are very difficult to find in my market as well. Associates seem to be relatively plentiful. So I've had an ad out and got several responses. So I'm in the process of doing that search as we speak.
What about non-clinical, like front office team members?
I haven't had to look for one real recently, but when I did the last time, about a year and a half ago, that didn't seem to be a problem.
Good. I'm kind of planting the seed in your mind and in our listeners' mind already, when it comes to that. You've self-diagnosed a couple of areas here that you probably have been, looking from a 3,000 foot level on the practice and kind of saying, these are the areas I really feel like are opportunities. And I want to see how close those are to some of the things that I'm thinking about. What have you already started to kind of mull over in your mind, other than associate, other than, yeah, I know I need to grow hygiene? What are some of the areas that you have seen as opportunities?
So like I said, I built a freestanding building. That was kind of my only option to be located where I wanted to be. And we built it as such where we can do an addition. So I know that I'm already probably at the point where we're maxed for space. We can add some hours to get a little more capacity, but we're buttoned up against physical capacity. So I've gotten the ball rolling on doing an addition to my building, which would take us from 6 operatories to 10. But till that's completed is still probably close to a year away.
So a little bit of strategy is needed here when it comes to the way we're scheduling, right? Because you've maxed
Correct.
out your facilities.
Absolutely.
Yep. Given those boundaries, growing and you sound like you're busting at the seams. So have you explored options to kind of look at the schedule a little differently? Like you said, expanding hours, or kind of like I think that strategic scheduling, like George talks about, in terms of, staggering things. How does that sound as you're looking for an associate? I think that may be something to keep on the horizon as well.
Yeah, I have thought about it, and we do have some extended hours. So on Mondays and Tuesdays, we're open till 7 p.m., and then we're open at 7 a.m. Wednesday through Friday. We do have some operatories that during our open office hours are not being fully utilized. So I'm working to try to get that rectified and use those operatories because we need them.
Let's look out long term now. Ideally, you're talking about a short term goal of reducing 2 of your clinical days, but kind of tell me what does this scenario look like, say, 2-3 years from now?
I'm pretty adamant about just wanting one location. I've never really had a desire to have a multi-location office. My professional satisfaction comes from running the business, watching a team of individuals come together and grow and be highly functioning, satisfied, happy, treating our patients well, having high customer satisfaction due to good quality, efficiency, affordability. I feel like you got to kind of know yourself. And a lot of dentists they get professional satisfaction from clinical stuff and would rather hand over the administrative stuff. I love making the pieces of the team fit together and work together as optimally as possible. And I personally would rather hand over the teeth than the business. That's just how I am and where my professional satisfaction comes from. So I think long term, I don't have any ambitions or desires to retire or quit doing clinical dentistry anytime soon. Maybe gradually step down from 4 to 3 to 2 days a week clinically. And then, like I said, just have a little more freedom and flexibility on those other days. And I do have some desire, or I think I would get some satisfaction from mentoring younger doctors as well. I'm not opposed to that. I just can't have my clinical schedule be packed full and then try to mentor them simultaneously.
Do you think that the mentoring part of having this associate has not being able to do that because you're so busy, because you're working 5 days currently, has kind of hindered anything up until now?
Yeah, it probably has hindered the associate's growth a little bit, or at least slowed it down. Me not being able to teach him things and show him things about how to do it when I'm not there, because I'm always there fixing teeth, and not being able to educate him.
Right. Absolutely. I think that's you're recognizing that, I think, but we'll talk numbers in next week's episode. Okay, so is there anything else you want to add, to kind of give me and our listeners, kind of any additional things to add there for both of us as we're kind of mulling over our treatment plan in our mind?
I have a wonderful team. I've been fortunate from an HR perspective. I don't have issues with team. I enjoy, like I said, making a team work together. I think I have some good leadership qualities. I'm vulnerable with my team. I admit mistakes. I own up to them. And I kind of hope that is reflected and they do the same for me. Right now, my stress comes from being too busy, from having fixing teeth for 7, 8, 9 hours a day, then doing admin stuff, and then trying to have a personal life too. So I just need to get some of that off my plate. And my personal preference would be to hand over some of the clinical duties or tasks and focus on the business.
You've pegged some of the areas here that you use the word stuck. You will plateau. You'll continue to plateau for a while until you get to a point where you can free up your time as well as free up some of the team members' time. I can't wait to continue our conversation next week. the audience is really going to see and hear great information in terms of, I realize that this is definitely a stressful time. There's great opportunity, but the bottleneck, as you've described, seems to be on the doctor's side right now. Let's see what we talk about next week in terms of getting that to open up. Thank you so much, Keith, for being our guest today. And we'll see everyone next week on Practice Underwater.
All right, Matt. So we said there was some mindset work that we needed to discuss. And first, before we get there, I wanted to hear your thoughts on the interview. We kind of talked about it a little bit in the intro, but I wanted to hear just your general thoughts on her style and all the things.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird, like listening to this and knowing where I would take the interview, where I would push him on mindset, and then she doesn't, is different. Is different to listen to, and it's going to be an adjustment for us too. Not being the ones to give these interviews and like kind of screaming in our earphones of like, oh, push him on that one, like, oh, I can hear it coming through. But I thought she did amazing. We kind of forget how tough these are to do, like especially your first time. Like just hit record, it's you and the doc, and you're talking to thousands of dentists, and it's scary. And I remember a year and a half being in their shoes, and I thought she did amazing. Like given all that, like I think we offline have given her some feedback on where we kind of want her to maneuver some of these conversations. But yeah, I just thought she did a really good job, and total hats off to Suzanne for jumping into it.
Yeah, it's funny. I think people don't understand how difficult Practice Underwater is to record. So, and I think we could do a better job of providing more structure, moving forward on the back end, because really it is, if you're listening, like it is, you hit record with somebody you've never met and you just go. And, I remember listening to, I'll be honest, Matt, I feel like that is something I typically will grab onto faster than you will, the ability to just kind of wing it. I think you're somebody that typically is like to be more prepared. And I think early on, we were both struggling with Practice Underwater. Like if you listen to our first, I actually, for coach training, I played my first interview ever with Jane. And about 20 minutes in, I turned it off and I said, I can't listen to that. I said, there's too many different places I would go with that I didn't take the interview. And it was really frustrating.
Yeah, I can't. I mean, my first probably 5, I could never listen to. Like, just
yeah, it's so tough. And I think the thing that was really cool for me is I got to see all of the areas that the coaching department adds to what our clients get now versus what I did. And I hope you guys will see that next week even more. There's things that she talks about that are so tangible and actionable, and like you can do them tomorrow in your practice. And we don't go there very often. And then I also saw areas where Mastermind really fills in the gaps. And I think that for me, it was a lot about, the associate situation, what he wants, all of those areas. And kind of Suzanne admittedly had said, afterwards that this is stuff in a coaching relationship she would definitely press into. But it's nerve-wracking being on Practice Underwater. It's really hard to do this. And so for everyone in our audience, like I think it'll be cool to watch every time we get someone new on air, there is an adjustment period. And, I think 3 months is kind of our internal expectations. When every time we bring someone on air, we say for 3 months, it's going to be a little rocky, and then you'll kind of get settled in.
I think one last piece on this. I think a big reason why the interviews are a lot harder than a coaching relationship is because there's a baseline lack of relationship with the person you're talking to. Like you're just meeting them. So you making assertions and like pointing out weaknesses and like being assertive is uncomfortable and like not that well done without a relationship built. And especially like Suzanne and our other coaches being former office managers, telling a dentist that their case acceptance and their diagnosis is low and like, what are we going to do about fixing that? It's like a very uncomfortable conversation and not one that's very easy to have, especially with no relationship.
And, it's interesting because I think this is a good example of illustrating this point. So James, we talked about it a lot on Practice Underwater. So he came on the first time about a little over a year ago. I did an interview with him. And his leadership was a topic on the interview. And I told him, like, well, you want to fire the office manager. Why don't we fire the owner? And I kind of talked about how his leadership apparently sucks. And then actually, like, I know him really well now. We've been working together for a while, and he's been with our department for over a year. And he's like one of the best leaders that of our client pool. He's
Wow.
really good, and I totally missed that in the interview.
Mm-hmm.
And I almost, I think like 3 or 4 months in, I reached out to him to apologize for what I had said about him on Practice Underwater, because I totally missed the mark. And I
Yeah.
think that's a good example to highlight that, this is like a live blind first date. Like, you don't really know the person. You're learning about them on air, and we have to make assumptions to get stuff done. But, a lot of times we're wrong. And so it's really, really tough to do this.
And
And
also, you have to make it entertaining too, which like these
yeah,
kind of conversations are not inherently entertaining. Our audience knows from listening to a year and a half of them. Like, you have to be really into this like stuff to like actually find entertainment from it. And to add in that as like the host and the leader of the interview is kind of a skill we got over time, and one that Suzanne will definitely find, because she's, it doesn't come out so much in these two parts, but she's incredibly funny and light and like,
yeah.
hilarious. And that will come out. It's just a matter of her getting comfortable.
Yeah, and I think it's cool for our audience to, and there's two ways we could do it, right? We could do like 10 of these behind the scenes and not release any of them, and then she could like just kind of come out and kill it.
Mm-hmm.
Or we could kind of release her growth. And we've always just aired our growth. And if you listen to me 3.5 years ago, like, I'm gonna sound a lot different than I do now, and she's the same. So
Yeah, I mean, they don't come to us to see like the buttoned up product from the start. Like, that's not who we are. Like, we'll never be that. So if you're expecting perfection every time, that's not us.
But anyway, let's get to, so we've been fairly candid, and I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if Suzanne's going to appreciate this, but we've been fairly candid about what we feel we would have pressed into. So Matt, can you talk about that? Like, what type of, so like, let's just say this Dachshund mastermind, what kind of stuff are you talking about with them?
Well, I think to kind of back up a second, I think I want to acknowledge the doctor first in our audience as well, and then point to where his opportunity for growth is. So the acknowledgement is he's and a lot of our audience has done this too. Like, they've raised their ceiling on what's possible, and they're going for it. They've heard the stories from me and you, from other guests on the show, that whether that's dropping clinical days, whether that's going from solo to a group, whether that's being multi, whether that's being an absentee offsite owner, like, they have raised their ceiling on what they actually want. And he knows what he wants. Like, he knows he wants to be 3 days clinical. He knows he wants to have more of a traditional group practice. He knows he wants to have a more full-time associate. He knows what he's passionate in. He's passionate in running the business. He's passionate in like team training, and he welcomes team breakdowns, and he knows what he wants. So, and I think our audience has done the same. Like, people we talk to, they're always now really shooting for the thing that they want, and that's amazing. And that's kind of a step I think Shared Practice has really cultivated in their listeners, and the listeners in their minds have allowed that to be possible. So, first acknowledgement there.
Yeah, I gotta piggyback on that. Wow. Yeah, totally true. I texted you while I was listening to this, and I had said it was really cool to hear both her and him, the guest, using our lingo.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they use ugly duckling. They use a lot of words that are, I think we don't realize how much of our philosophy has developed these novel terms that are not used anywhere else. And, I could tell his mindset was, he was a shared practice doc.
Mm-hmm.
And that term now, we've started to coin it, right? A shared practice doc is somebody who thinks like him, who goes for it all, who wants what they want, and who's firm in it. And, more or less hires people to get what they want, but they
Mm-hmm.
don't compromise. And he was like, I don't want to not work clinically. Like, he was pretty firm on that. He was like, I want to work clinically. I want to work 3 days and then 2 days. Right. And like, he was pretty firm on that. And I just, yeah, that was so cool. And then hearing Suzanne talk about our philosophy from somebody who was in the industry, not using our philosophy,
Mm-hmm.
and then joining our company and adopting our philosophy as if it was her own, and then adding to it. It was really cool on both sides, both from Keith, the
Mm-hmm.
guest, kind of like using terminology that we talk about, and you can tell he's listened to almost every episode, or like, we can tell he's really dialed in, and then her as well. So yeah, that was really, really cool. Thanks for saying that. I totally would have skipped over that.
No, I enjoyed that as well. And then kind of to finish the thought of like, okay, now the growth area for him. And this is something, thinking about it as I was listening to the interview, this is something I really got from being married to Ellen, and something that is kind of her special sauce with her life coaching clients is like, okay, the client has given himself or herself permission to have everything they want. Like, he knows what he wants. He's like in his head, okay, this is what I want. but he's not taking action to get there. Like he's stuck in that piece because I think there's something inherent in him that still says like I can't have it all. Like it's I don't know what words are going on in his mind, but it's selfish of me to want to work less. Like a lot of the mindsets we've heard on Practice Underwater of like, well, the associate has to work late nights, so I feel guilty not working there myself. Mm-hmm. Like that kind of talk. So that's where I would have pushed him as far as like, okay, why aren't we making action to get what you want? Because you know what it is. And we can talk through some of the steps if you're unclear, but I think you know a lot of them already. That's where I would have really dug into them.
So let's have that conversation, right? I don't know if we want to role play it or how we want to do it, but let's have it. So
just go over the topics of what we would say.
Yeah. So, we're talking about, so what did you think he wanted? What did you extrapolate as his want in this interview?
So he wants a traditional group practice. He wants to grow hygiene days. He wants to have a full-time associate, maybe even another part-time after that. He's already planning on adding 4 more operatories. Looking at his PBN, his practice is ready for that. He has 2,200 patients. They did 100.
What's his production? What's his adjusted production?
Well, his adjusted production in January was, give me 1 second, 143. They only collected 112. So they're like an extremely underproducing office for the number of patients they have. And I think a lot of that is due to the hygiene.
Well, that's talked about in part 2.
Yeah, we talk about it a bit in part 2, but like hygiene being too booked, like he says in the next episode, he can't get a new patient in for 3 weeks. But like, so this is our classic, like ugly duckling type practice. He's kind of that between solo and group. And what would you say that are like the first 1, 2, 3 steps to get on this path?
I mean, he said it like a million times. Like, I need to just cut back clinically. I need to just stop fixing teeth. It's like, I feel like he said it like a million different ways. And I mean, Matt, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, but something we talk about a lot in Mastermind, owners working 5 days a week, that's like a big no-no.
Yeah, no way.
Right? Like,
no way.
If you have 2 dentists in the practice, one's an owner and one's an associate, one's working 3 days, one's working 5. Like, he got it backwards. Yeah. It should be him working 3, associate working 5.
And one place I would have had Suzanne press him on was like, is that 2-day-a-week associate, does he want that person full time? Because if he does, and he says he doesn't want to fire them, even when he's hiring someone new, I would try to get them full time. That's like, I thought. Well,
and you kind of said something before about being Mr. Excuses. This is where like the mastermind conversations really come in, where it's like associate mentoring. It seems like he just kind of like surrendered to the fact that his associate wasn't going to be productive and wasn't going to work there. He's like, yeah, he's just a new dentist. And like, he's just not going to be productive because he's a new dentist. So we're all just going to do a bunch of fillings. And it's like, well, like we can grow that, like that's something we can work on. And, personally, I would, so if I was the owner of this practice, I would have the conversation with the associate and say, look, man, I'm too stretched right now. Like, I cannot do what the practice needs because I'm unable to be here, this much. So I need 2 dentists here every single day of the week. And you can either add more days, or I'm going to bring somebody to fill in the other days, and I can keep you and we can kind of work on growing in these certain areas. So I know you have another job, like you can quit that other job. Like, that's possible. I can add you more days here. Like, what are your thoughts? And I'd hear what the associate has to say. If the associate wants to be the full-time associate at the practice, because he'll need a full-time and a part-time eventually, right? Because he's kind of growing.
Yeah.
And so the associate can be the full-time, and then they open up to 10 doctor days. They add a 3rd hygienist on those 2 days that they don't currently have hygiene, and he maybe cuts back a little bit. They can rock that schedule for a little bit. And then that's one option, right? If the associate's willing to quit the other job. If the associate's not willing to quit the other job, then I'm hiring someone else to also be part-time to fill in the gaps. But I'm not going to keep this situation going any longer at 5 days. That is the thing I'm going to put a stop to as fast as possible.
And he also that's good. Thanks for the shout out there. He also talks about growing in 10 ops, and he was saying that it was going to take a year. I don't know if he actually said why it's going to take so long, whether that's just like some inherent, I didn't know.
I can tell you why it's going to take so long. That's permitting and doing a ground up build. He did a ground up build the first time. So this is a big ask me how I know. This process sucks. So yeah, it's just going to take a while. But um, I mean, I found it funny. 3.5 years. Matt, what's his new patient flow? Do you have that?
Yes. His new patient flow in January was 50.
Okay.
They entered 71 though.
Oh, so he's overbooked.
Yeah,
Big
he's
time.
way
Yeah.
overbooked.
Yeah, I mean,
his hygiene capacity is not enough. He knows it. I just don't know if he's taking adequate steps to address that.
yeah, I think, and right, this is a chicken and the egg, right? It's like, do you cut back clinically first and then take action, or do you like he just doesn't have time because he's so busy clinically.
Cut back clinically instantly. That's
yeah, like instantly. And it's funny because every time she brings it, and it's funny in part 2, it's even worse. She tells him all these areas where his practice can grow, and the whole time she's doing that next week, all I'm thinking is he can't do any of it because he's too busy clinically. Like he's gonna have like all the stuff she's saying, he can't do any of it. And this is where it would be great to, for him, like to have support and to have someone like, someone reach out to his office manager and like help her do these things that aren't being done while he's still overstretched clinically, and help him position the schedule and help him, like, he needs support in ownership, and he needs to cut back clinically. Like this is the definition of being bogged down in day to day and not work. This is the working in your business, not on your business, like that cliche. This is like it personified in this guest.
And I think some of it stems from like it was a startup, it was a ground out build. He says in this episode that this is his baby. Like he's afraid to like he has control issues with his practice.
Yeah. I forgot about that.
He's got his hands tight around that neck, and he's not letting go. Like he's gonna give excuses before he's gonna let go. And
so let's talk about the excuses. We haven't addressed the excuses enough, I don't think. Can you talk about the excuses? Because they stick out to us like a sore thumb.
Yeah, I mean, listen, like I was a little off. It was a little off-putting his relationship to feedback. Like Suzanne would point out an area that the practice was underperforming, and he would immediately hit it with an excuse. Like she said that his average treatment plan size, this comes in the next episode, but is low, is $600 a month per patient. And he, immediately points to the insurance fees. Like I'm a very heavy PPO office.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, George is a very heavy PPO office, and his isn't anywhere near this. And I'm pretty PPO as well, and I'm also nowhere near this. And we see tons of clients that are nowhere near this. Like it's more you than it is your insurance fees. That plays a part, of course. But like the fact that every time she digs in on him on a weakness, he goes to that place. It says something about his mindset, and that he is holding back the growth of his practice because he's very defensive, he's very possessive, he's controlling. And that's something to get to the next level he has to break out of, because everything to me of this practice, doing 110 with our coaching department, this is a 220 off. This is a doubling office in a year. Like very straightforwardly.
Yeah, honestly, very straightforward. Yeah.
To use George's word, very straightforward.
Yeah, the most abrasive thing. People hate when I say that. They always
hate when you say that. So
I get so much feedback. Like, you just stop saying it's very straightforward.
That is off-putting.
Anyway, I mean, I genuinely feel it's straightforward. I don't know how else to communicate that, but anyway, but here's the thing though, like so we go back to this whole excuses thing, and we talk about it over and over again, but if you like, I don't know, I think it's like there was a Parks Underwater guest a few weeks ago, or maybe a few months ago, actually, it's a while, and he was like kind of a jerk for the first half of part 1.
Oh yeah.
And then I broke him. And then he stopped like being so defensive and just started like kind of letting it in. And I just found that in this guest case, sometimes you feel the need to like defend your position or prove something, or, come from a place of defensiveness. And it's vulnerable to admit, like, this interview could have gone so much differently if Suzanne had said like, well, why haven't you cut back clinically? She kind of said that. And he's like, well, I don't have time. My associate's new. Like she kind of gave all the stuff. But what if he was like, I just have a hard time letting go.
Yeah.
I'm having a really hard time with control. I can't imagine my patient seeing someone else because I don't want them to have a bad experience.
Yeah. Like, then it's a different conversation.
Yeah. This could have gone so much. And so it's like, we harped on Suzanne not getting into mindset, but like he didn't give her an entry door.
No.
Like he just kept giving excuse. And it's like, it's her first interview, but like,
yeah,
if he had brought the vulnerability, and if he had said like, yeah, I have like, he's anonymous. Tell us the truth. Like,
I know.
why haven't you done this? We still don't know. We still don't know all of the reasons why. And I would have loved to see from him some like really vulnerable, like honest reasons why he's actually having a hard time. All we heard is why he can't do things because he's too busy clinically, but why has he had such a hard time letting go? That's what I really want to see.
Yeah. And I think for us it's like we take for granted the personal work that you and I have done for the last several years. Like
Oh
just
yeah.
for example, like being life coached is very much like it can feel like you're on the stand. Like you're vulnerable that whole time. The
Oh
person's
yeah.
pointing out, giving assertions, and like the way I have dealt with it is like I'm just going to make myself open to everything. And when it comes into me, that doesn't mean I always have to agree with it. I don't have to like take every point of feedback and be like, oh, that's actually the truth. But I do need to see what's in it, what's in there for me. Like what can I glean from this piece, this assertion that this person gave me, who's unbiased and just a kind of observer, and how can I use that to change if I deem that's something that's going to serve me, rather than jumping in right to the defensiveness, because that's an easy first way to go into. You got to really kind of like fight against that.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. You know what, Matt, you're right. I think we take for granted how good we are at taking feedback.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to kind of talk about that process a little out loud. And, it always hurts. So I talk about it a little bit. Practice Underwater, I got feedback about how I'm not actionable enough lately. And the fact that I haven't been in the office being a dentist has been showing. And like that really hurt. It hurt my feelings. And then I looked into it and I said, okay, well, what is there for me in there? And I'm like, some people are not going to like everything I say. That's part of this. But then the other part of this is I need to put myself more in the mindset of the listener about, what it's like being in the practice, being a dentist. And I need to keep calling back to my experience doing that instead of talking about my day-to-day life right now, because it's not as relevant. And so, but feedback will always hurt. And I don't think there's a world where people who are good at taking feedback don't feel that pain or that sadness or that, upset feeling. It's just how you handle it. And by just letting it in and feeling like, ouch, that made me feel sad. And then like you just handle it and then you proceed forward by assessing the feedback and kind of going from there. That's how I would suggest all of our listeners start learning to take feedback. And you don't have to change everything. I heard feedback sometimes and I'm like, you know what? I see what you're seeing. Like I agree with you and I like this quality about myself, even though you don't. So I'm going to keep doing it, and in this case, right, the can't drop days clinically, like there's no way that that's serving him long term. So this isn't an area where he'll look and say like, you know what, I don't like that, and I like this isn't feedback you push back on because it aligns with your long term goals. But let's just say, for example, she were to highlight, the way his plan for like adding 4 ops. Like Suzanne would never do that, but let's just say like an accountant would, right? And then let's smash CPAs again. He'd be like, well, I don't like your idea to add 4 more ops. It's a lot of expense, and you're barely growing. Like you're a new practice. This is bad. Your cash flow, your staff overhead is too high. All the accountant crap, and he could be like, ouch, that hurts my feelings. I'm a little scared that this plan might not work out. But like he's an accountant, he doesn't really know what he's talking about. They don't really understand practice management at all. They kind of overstep a lot. Accountants really don't know what they're doing. So I'm probably just going to do it anyway. But like that definitely hurt my feelings. And I think like there's 2 different ways of handling feedback depending on who's giving it. And accountants, I would suggest a lot of the times you guys do that.
I would agree with that.
I just hate accountants. Oh my gosh, it's becoming a thing. So anyway, so let's kind of like circle back to the end. Let's just kind of wrap up. This has been a really long outro, but like let's just circle back and kind of conclude that, going into part 2, Suzanne is going to talk about a lot of areas where this practice is going to grow and opportunities they have for growth. And honestly, that's going to be more for you guys, the listeners, than that it's going to be for him, the dentist, because he's still strapped clinically and he can't do any of those things. So,
but luckily it's recorded and he can listen back. And
yeah,
when he makes that move, all right, he has a recording of this.
So we've already talked about how he plans on, there's multiple options, but he needs to drop his clinical days. That's an absolute must. And so we'll kind of carry it on to the next part and we'll really pick it up where we left off.
Sounds good.